Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning to most of you. I think there are probably a few joining today that might be afternoon. But I wanted to start by welcoming all of you to today's webinar, Leveling Up Your Event Platform Capabilities. My name is Mike Dietrich. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Cvent. And I wanted to just start by thanking all of you for choosing to spend an hour with us today. I think we've got some great content for you. So let me just do a couple quick housekeeping things, and then we will get started with the content for today. So first, in addition to thanking you for joining us, we'd love to have you be as interactive as you can today with us and the content. So what you should see is if you'd like to submit questions throughout the day today, please submit those questions in the right-hand panel in Attendee Hub there in the Q&A tab. It really is that simple. And then please feel free to upvote any of those questions that you may see any of your peers put in there that you think are particularly interesting that you'd like us to focus on at the end here. A quick note on the content for today. Laura and I will be speaking for about 35 minutes. But then I think our favorite part is going to be hearing from you all what questions you have as a result of what we're going to be talking about. So after those 35 or 40 minutes of prepared remarks, look forward to your questions and answers at the end. A perpetual favorite, a question we get on every webinar is, how do I get the presentation? There's some great information you're going to see today. So if you want to download the material, click the details link in the bottom right, and then the view full session details link. That'll give you access to all of the great insights and numbers. You're going to see a lot of numbers today to get that in front of you. Then at the end, please take a moment and fill out the survey at the bottom right. We do a lot of webinars. We do them because we hope that they're valuable for you and that we can continue to make them better only to the extent you tell us what you like and what you didn't. So please do take a minute and fill out that survey at the end. Okay, so with the housekeeping behind us, let me give you one quick second of setup before we bring on our guest speaker. So look, as Omicron faded in the last part of the second half of 2022, all of us were probably really excited to return to in-person meetings and events, right? We loved it. But we also found that as we did that, we had this new toolkit with us. We had our in-person events that we were happy to get back to. We also had virtual still out there. We also had hybrid event formats still out there, and we continued to experiment those in the last part of 2022. But it struck us that as we went into planning cycles for what 2023 was going to look like, first, organizations and teams were starting to plan for that first full normal, air quotes, normal year. As our first year back completely post-pandemic, what was that mix going to look like, right? So as we had in-person, virtual, hybrid events at our fingertips, we had that new toolkit, we had these lessons learned. How are organizations starting to put together these programs? So I had kind of a natural marketer's curiosity about this. What's happening in the market? We wanted to see not only the types of programs that organizations were putting together, but maybe more importantly, why they were putting them together that way. And so to help us navigate through this, Cvent commissioned Forrester Consulting to conduct a study. We conducted this study in November of 2022, so in the middle of all these urgent planning processes, and we asked over 500 meeting and event decision makers around the globe how they were approaching putting together their 2023 event programs, given the macroeconomic forces that were in front of them, the lessons they'd learned from the pandemic. And so guiding this study was the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, Laura Ramos. Laura is our guest speaker today. You're going to hear a lot more from Laura than you are from me today. So Laura, let me throw it to you very quickly and ask you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mike. And on behalf of Forrester, we are so pleased to join you and to be asked to do this commissioned research that I'm very excited to share with everyone today. I've been at Forrester longer than I care to say, 19 years. And I've been covering B2B marketing for most of that. I've also been like one of the analysts to do our first wave on this particular space, which happened during the pandemic. So this is a very exciting space for us. We're seeing a lot of change, a lot of things that need to continue to change. And I'm just very excited to share this information with everyone today.
Fantastic. Well, Laura, thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's get right to it. I'm sure the audience is interested to see what we found. So, Laura, let's start with perhaps the overall context, right? The big picture. So there's so many changes. We talked about them. A lot of macroeconomic forces at work here, tighter budgets, potential recessionary environments, a lot for planners and teams to be digging through. So what did the research show, Laura, that was, when we looked at the top drivers that were on their minds, what were they? How were people looking at this space this year?
Yeah, if you think about this, this is a study of 509, as you said, meeting planners and professionals, people that are engaged in the whole meeting and events process. Um, Mostly North America, but a good chunk from Europe and APAC. So they're well represented in this. As are, I just wanted to share one more thing, four key industries: associations, tech, financial services and insurance, and the pharmaceutical life sciences area were the ones at the top. Lots of other industries included as well. So I just want to give everybody a sense of what was going on. And so we started out on the next slide by asking them about their 2023 priorities as a company. No surprise that increased revenue came out at the top at 66%. Second was improving customer experience. And we find this very interesting because this is very totally consistent with other research that Forrester does. In fact, some of our studies, customer experience is ahead of increased revenue right now. And then this followed by efficiencies, business agility, and accelerating our digital transformation efforts. Almost 50% were, said that this is an important organizational priority. Okay, so then we asked, well, how important are meetings and events for achieving each of these priorities? And it's super interesting to see that, a greater percentage said, meetings and events are about increasing revenue. They're very important or critical to helping us achieve that goal. The other one that was interesting, though, is if you look at the bottom, it's accelerating our digital transformation efforts. 81% said that it was important or critical to that particular situation or to that particular goal. And if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that, okay, digital transformation, this is a big clue, right? That events have fundamentally changed in their nature. No longer are we seeing this, the big audiences in the conference rooms with the speaker on stage. They've gone digital, and even now the digital is, whether you're in person or not, a very strong component to what's going on. In fact, as you saw on the prior slide, 81% said that events play a key role in accelerating their digital efforts. Now, the main reason is that attendees expect in-person journeys to be more digital. Our survey shows that 77% of our respondents agreed that their in-person attendees expect more digital than they did a few years ago. The pandemic exposed all planners and organizers to having to do digital. We learned a lot from that, but most importantly, our audience got used to it, and they're now expecting that from us. The other thing that we wanted to, look at is how important are events to impacting different goals that companies have. And maybe not surprisingly, respondents expect events today to really impact customer business goals first. So you can see that increased customer member engagement, deepen our customer understanding, increased product adoption are all related to making the customer experience better. And it's the two at the bottom that are, more focused on the company, on the business, on the brand specifically. But when we asked about what we found more surprising is that the internal event goals had even a bigger percentage of the respondents saying that they were important, mainly for increasing employee engagement as everybody starts to move from work from home only to some sort of hybrid format. deepen the understanding of what's going on with employees. We've kind of been a little out of touch with our employees, and what events and meetings that are digital and interactive and highly involving help us do is understand what's going on. And that's going to help to foster those environments too of innovation that we really need. And then if we go to the next slide, events we're seeing today are really about meeting the business needs of the business. And we're seeing this in the fact that more stakeholders are involved. They've grown events. Let's face it, now events have grown in importance across the company. They're no longer this little organization overside here that runs our events. What we're really doing is that we have events that are more important across the company. So with the question here, you have to pay attention. It says this stakeholder is more involved today as compared to 2 years ago. So keep that in mind as you read through these results. Events, they involve more stakeholders. So for example, if you look at corporate IT, you go, wait, only 15%? No, corporate IT has been involved for a while. In fact, in a separate question, more than half said that IT owns their event technology RFPs. But what's some of the curious ones, and we thought, oh, this is really indicative of how events are now spread throughout and really supporting a lot of different business needs, is sales is now more involved.
Yeah.
Customer success is now more involved. And the interesting one is cybersecurity, because we're recognizing there's a lot of key information about our customers that needs to be protected, that we're gaining from event interaction, that needs to be protected and treated properly.
Yeah. So interesting to see those big macro forces starting to, I mean, I know it's on our minds here, right? There's cost constraints. We need efficiencies, but we need to grow. And the event programs are going to do that. The virtual pieces that we all just learned are not going away. They're starting to continue to inform the programs going forward. And then I think, as we're going to talk about a little bit later too, when you open up that virtual aperture, and that continues to be a part of the meetings and events programs that we all run, the data that comes back from that can be overwhelming. There can be a lot. So again, no surprise here, Laura, to maybe see that all of the corporate IT folks and data security is top of mind as well. Okay, so that's kind of great foundation, setting the stage of what's on folks' mind. So I'd like to shift gears for a second to look at some of the key challenges, because that environment, Laura, that you just did such a wonderful job painting, comes with its challenges. There's a lot of different requirements that go into the meetings and events program now. In person is different than virtual. It's very different than hybrid. A lot of balls in the air. So what did the folks that responded tell us in terms of the challenges that they're facing in this new environment?
Yeah, let's take a look at some of that data. Well, I think, to kind of understand the context of the challenges, you have to understand that, demand for events is really exploding, and we asked a question like, how many events are you planning in the next 12 months? And these are like, wow, big events. So big numbers. And what we found interesting too, is that the number of internal events, these are averages, but the number of internal events are more than double the external events that they're planning. So in rebounding enthusiastically after the hiatus that the pandemic forced us to take. But as you do the next build, you'll see that all of these events are being executed and managed by a growing number of technology and service providers. In fact, 2/3 say that they are currently using anywhere from 3 to 15 different platforms to run their major events, or to technologies or service providers for their most complex and sophisticated events. And unfortunately, we're seeing that this fragmentation in the technology and services space is starting to create some of the major challenges. On the next slide, we'll see that another set of challenges is around data integration. And if you look at this, we said, well, what are your top event-related challenges in the data and technology space? So even though they're, working with, the 2/3 are working with 3 to 15 platforms, duplicative technology ended up at the bottom of the list. What's on top is all related to using the data. So a lot of concerns about data capture, leveraging it to get data insights, using it to support sales and to fuel marketing campaigns. Overall, though, if you look at the other challenges, you'll see that value. And so measurement becomes another challenge and demonstrating the ROI of the event portfolio. So optimizing event value, designing the right experiences, and right there on third on the list, calculating event ROI. So they're struggling with the technology choices, struggling with what to do with the data, and still struggling with how do we demonstrate that events are having an impact financially, measurably on the business.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah. So Laura, that when I look at all that, it's first of all, it's no surprise. I know that those of us that write the checks to have the events in the first place, right? In this budget constraint, we got to see return on that. Data is the way to measure that. But as we look at that, I don't know, Laura, you said you've been at Forrester for 19 years. I've been doing this or something like it for about 20. It feels like every year we have these same discussions about struggles with attendee data capture, struggles with attendee data activation. And so I really appreciate your thoughts here about how might we get out of this endless cycle that we're in about making the data more valuable and actionable for folks.
Yeah, this might be a challenge for some people who have long been event organizers, right? Because your whole focus has been how do we make the event special and how do we make it for something of value for the attendees at that time when it's happening. And now it's time to treat events more strategically and to think of them as part of an ongoing series of interactions and communications that we're having with our customers that are punctuated by those, times when we do get together in person or have a deeper experience virtually or in a hybrid setting. So you've got to invest. This is invest in people who have this sort of ability to collaborate more, to look at the big picture. How do we fit with demand gen? How do we fit with sales? How do we get the right data into our systems so that that data that we gather about attendee experiences helps us make better business decisions? Putting the processes in place, investing in the technology, and getting rigorous about how we're measuring across the entire portfolio. The other thing you're going to have to do is make data, and I put that in quotes because I think there's a real key need to have a data profile that says, hey, for every event, there's a minimum amount of information that we're trying to collect that is really essential. And anything, in addition, in terms of insights, almost like there's a hierarchy of insights that we're looking for to understand their interest, understand how long they attended certain things, and boil that up into saying, hey, look, if somebody is having something going on where we need to pay more attention to that, or hey, maybe there's an opportunity to talk to somebody at this company further, someone who's our client. So making that data profile consistent and part of what you manage on an ongoing basis about all of your customers. And then finally, it's about integration. You got to put the event tech, whatever your strategy is, you've got to make sure that it is connected to the rest of your, certainly MarTech and sales tech stack, but also, the rest of your IT. It's got to comply with the same security, reliability, governance rules that your IT people are concerned about, and that's cybersecurity specialists are concerned about as well. So that's why I think those are the three things that I've been telling people that they need to do to think about solving those challenges and make things like data management and how do we demonstrate the ROI, all of those things become less of an issue.
Yeah, it's so interesting because Laura, when we see this done well from some of our customer base, it's a lot like what you just said, right? The planning teams, the meeting and event organizers, they're working with their business units, they're working with their business teams, and they're deciding like what data do we need to capture? what is a lead from this meeting if you're in the corporate space, right? And they define that specifically going in. And then it's interesting that the role of technology then is twofold. It's there to deliver a great attendee experience. It's also there to listen for the pieces of data that you told it to listen for, because that's the piece that you needed to bring out of it.
And I think that's fundamentally the big change here. And it's exciting because it's brought events from being events into, wow, part of the business focus.
Yeah. And that digital transformation. So let's hope, Laura, let's hope that this is the last time we have that discussion about, and hope it gets better from here.
Yes.
Okay. One of the third area that we asked this global community about was, remember at the very beginning of today, I talked about we wanted to see what they were doing, but just as importantly, or maybe more importantly, we wanted to see why these organizations were putting the event programs together the way they were doing it. They've got in person, they've got virtual, they've got hybrid, they may have webinar programs that are now in that mix too that they've got to think through. So we were very interested in why they were putting their programs together in the ways that they were. And so, Laura, let me hand it over to you. Data warning for those of you that are with us. There's a lot of data on this slide, but it's really interesting stuff. So, Laura, let me hand it over to you.
It is. So let me take you through it. But I think the first thing you will see is we're looking at by the different formats in the columns, and then the top 3 responses are in the rows. And there's a lot more data here. Please, work with Cvent. I'm sure they will be anxiously awaiting to share the results of the study that we did with all of you, and you'll be able to get a copy of that report. So we asked about the different formats and which goals were best met by each type. Overall, if you go ahead and do the build, in-person's back, right? This is where we saw the majority of concurrence, agreement that this is the really important part to putting your events together, right? It's that in-person is back. The respondents very much want to use in-person events, and the top response is to increase engagement. I think we've been away from our customers for a good part of 3 years. We want to get back in touch with them, see them, shake their hands, that sort of thing. And as always, in-person events continue to be the way of doing that, as well as a great opportunity to drive revenue. And that's the top goal, that everyone has as their business. So in-person is the clear winner here. Now, the opposite end of the scale is the virtual formats. And we find that this is really about expanding customer understanding. One of the biggest advantages of digital is the amount of data that you can collect while reaching even larger audiences that, for many reasons still don't want to come or can't come to the physical in-person format. So we see this as an important risk mitigation. What if there's another emergency that comes up? What if there's, a big snowstorm, which I know some of you are facing, and so because it gives you that flexibility to not have to cancel the event, but you can switch to virtual mode, I think we can see a lot more experimentation here. The other interesting area is hybrid formats. And these numbers are very close when it comes to hybrid. The real story here is that hybrid is about supporting even larger audiences by combining the in-person and remote. I think they're also, what this data is showing, pretty good, particularly good when you're trying to convey both information and also build relationships, using the in-person portion of the hybrid experience to build those relationships, and the remote to, establish the information, keep the connection going. And then finally, webinars we feel are, more passive than virtual events, because, they're only like 1 hour kind of thing, where a virtual event includes tracks and very many different things. But, respondents say that they deliver value for driving revenue, supporting partners, increasing adoption, activities that the field relies on a lot. So the difference for us between webinars and virtual is that, webinars is what people use locally to help their marketing and sales efforts. And virtual is, more of the big production that can have more of a global impact. So a lot to unpack here. But the bottom line is, depending on what your business goals are, use a combination of the different formats to meet those.
Like from the data, even whether you're talking about those external events or the internal ones, it was still, people are still pulling all three of these off the shelf. But I guess if you're looking for more depth of engagement in person, the data artifacts that come off of virtual can really help complete your understanding, maybe build that buyer profile. So really interesting. I want to do this again a year from now and see how this continues to settle out. Great stuff. Okay. So Laura, let's go to this fourth area, because as we've talked about, so much of what we've talked today says we've got more requirements than ever. These things, programs are still going to be a little complex, but we're doing all this against this backdrop. And I bet that everybody on the call right now is seeing this in some format or others. More cost conscious, more resource conscious. We're all much more attuned now to maybe the environmental and sustainability impacts and implications of our event programs. So it's this other set of factors that are now impacting our event organizers and these organizations that are putting these platforms together, putting these programs together. How are they responding then, Laura, from a technology perspective? What job are they asking technology to do, given that they've got to complete this Rubik's Cube perfectly?
Oh, yes. Well, the survey tells us that, looking at technology, now's the time for consolidation. This is the next major opportunity to really up-level your events. It was a big scramble around technology when the pandemic hit. And people tried a lot of different things. They still have a lot going on inside of their companies. And in fact, 82% of the respondents admitted to using a lot of point solutions. The problem is that when you have so many different pieces of technology, it's really hard to track the costs and the performance effectively, which can impact efficiency and can impact those questions about what are we getting as a result of these events. And this is a problem if you do the build, that so many point solutions that, it's important to solve. And 86% said that it is important to track cost and performance across all events. But here's kind of the issue. Well, less than half said that they can actually do it today. So when you look at what people are expecting the technology to do for them, you'll see that and these are large numbers, and they're not on the screen, they're small. It's 81%, 76, and 72. But as you read through that, you'll see that it's a large number of the respondents saying that consolidation, investing in a platform, is crucial in order to get that holistic view of performance, the ability to serve the different needs across a variety of event formats that we were just talking about, and ultimately to deliver that great customer experience. And don't forget, besides revenue, that's the second most important objective that these respondents said that they had for their business. So they want a lot from the platforms too. They're being, if you look at this, the story here, and again, the numbers are a little small, but 43, 42, 42, 41, 40, those are all kind of the same number. And we asked the question, which of the following are most important to your organization when choosing an event technology today? So these are the top 5. And I think it's interesting that, they want it to be flexible. They want it to go in and be implemented quickly. And they want it to be comprehensive, to really give you the ability to do end-to-end event management and look across the portfolio as well. The depth of the event, excuse me, of virtual is important, as is the ability to collect that engagement data. So this is what they're looking for in the platform the most.
Yeah. This is, in probably most organizations, most corporations. I imagine, though, this would also hold true to our association, nonprofits, and other friends that are joining us today.
Yeah.
Taking a hard look at software
participants
spend.
in this survey, yeah.
Yeah, taking a hard look at their software spend,
Mhm.
taking a hard look at the technology that underpins their programs, and it's hard to knock anybody for having to. We just all got through the pandemic as best we could, right? We pulled whatever technologies off the shelf to serve an urgent need. We had to maintain connections to our customers, but now as we're leaving a little bit of that behind, and as I said in some of the times I talked about this, is once we transfer out of have to and get back to the land of want to, and how do we really purposefully redesign our programs and the tech that powers them. Some really interesting insights that this global group gave us, Laura, so thank you for
Yeah,
walking us through those.
you bet.
Okay, so coming to the end of our prepared remarks here, but Laura, before we let the audience go, or well, before we transition to Q&A, please don't
Yes.
go, stay
Please
with
don't,
us.
stay, yes.
On the key recommendation side, because we've walked through a lot today. We've talked about the drivers, we've talked about the challenges, we've talked about the role of technology and how that's shifting. Laura, can you help kind of summarize your key recommendations coming out of this study?
Well, I think the first one, and it's time to benchmark what's going on with your technology and services with that eye towards consolidation. If you're going to looking for to get that, the flexibility, the integration speed, the comprehensive capabilities that most of the respondents want, it's going to require slimming down your technology options and integrating an event platform with your marketing and sales tech stack. This is what's going to let the event team get a really comprehensive view of how the portfolio is working, how it's performing, and it's going to make it easier to demonstrate the impact back to the business. Now, the second thing is making event data quality and analytics a primary requirement. Digital capabilities, whether they're, in concert with in-person events or hybrid or purely virtual and remote, that lets the teams gather more data than they've ever been able to do before. And putting it to work is now going to be the next key thing to do. So this isn't just about gathering data to improve the impact of the events, but for building those crucial insights into what customers want, what interests them, what do they think of your products, where do they want to go next, and so, as I said earlier, determining an event specific profile of data to make sure that you collect consistently and then is useful in helping sales and marketing do their jobs, helping internal teams determine what to design is going to be crucial. And it's going to make events more strategic and central to the business as well. Our third recommendation is to select partners based on proven experience connecting both digital and in-person formats. Okay, so with new business objectives to reach and more stakeholders to satisfy, event teams will need to think more about the overall role of the event portfolio in building business and engaging customers. So planning to work with, you need to, if you're in this situation, you should be planning to work with design partners and technology providers who can create some really innovative ways to make the physical and digital experiences flow together. And as I mentioned earlier, to create an experience that isn't just the point in time event, but extends prior to the event and afterwards, so that there's sort of a continuous flow of engagement that's happening that is punctuated by the events themselves. And then finally, it's about event ROI. You need to evaluate the ROI based on not just, hey, what did we get out of this event? But really based on the upfront goals and the objectives that you have for your events and for all of the events in your portfolio. We saw that ROI was the second most important metrics among respondents. Digital has changed how firms build and evaluate event programs and how audiences experience them. The key thing here to understand is that the event ROI can only be determined in relationship to what were your objectives and the business results that you expected to deliver. So before thinking about formats and agenda and logistics and content and all those other things that go into creating a really great event, you got to determine what outcomes and which audiences your events need to achieve, and then work backwards from there to figure out how your events are going to meet those goals.
Fantastic. Laura, thank you for that. Thank you for that summary. Again, we went through a lot today, but I think this is a great 4 key takeaways to leave with folks. So before we transition to Q&A, let me just do a couple quick things. Laura, first, I want to thank you and the Forrester team for conducting this. Fantastic insights. Hope to see you again, do this with you again next year. But before we take Q&A,
it was a pleasure, a real pleasure. Thank you.
Again, it's just you follow this space for years. Natural curiosity of the marketer. This continues to be such a dynamic market. It's always so interesting for me to figure out what it's feeling and what it's doing these days. So before we get to Q&A, a couple quick things for the audience. Please, as we talked about at the front, please complete that survey. A lot of effort goes into these. We want them to be useful, practically useful to you all, and we really value your feedback so we can continue to create and deliver content that you find meaningful and useful. So please give us your thoughts on the survey. And then the last thing I want to say before we go to the questions is just a couple quick things on upcoming webinars. About a week from now, there's going to be a great webinar on winning at trade shows, strategies and solutions for that. A lot of us are reactivating our trade show programs. So some great insights here on March 15th about that. Then following about a week later, this balancing act that we're all in now. Okay, got to create impactful, meaningful events and attendee experiences. Yeah, got to do that with even maybe less dollars than I had last year. So some practical tips and how-tos on how to navigate and balance those pieces. And then on the 29th of March, we're gonna round out March. We are gonna geek out a little bit with our Cvent data nerds. We have a lot of them. We've got a large event technology. We're an event technology company, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of events run through this system every year. And so because of that, we see some really interesting patterns about how people are doing events when they're starting registration, when they're ending registration, how many did they get? So on March 29th, we're going to package that up for you and hopefully share some really interesting insights on what we're seeing in our systems. So please join us on the 29th if you can. Okay, so time to head into live Q&A. So if you haven't already submitted anything, I'd encourage you to do that now. And I'm going to take a quick look at my console here and see what you all have come up with. And first of all, again, thank you for your time. I know this group is a very busy set of people. If you're anything like our meetings and events team, you've got a lot to do during the day. So I really do appreciate you all spending a little bit of time on that today. Okay, so let's start. Brenda, thank you for your question. And Laura, just so you know, neither of you, let's see what we get. Let's see what we get.
See what we get. I know, this is the fun part.
But Brenda, thank you. Brenda says, my stakeholders insist on not having a virtual option for on-site events. They think no one will come. Yet in 2020, we doubled attendance at our first virtual event. Any tips on convincing the C-suite to make events hybrid?
I would, I'd go show some of the hybrid, the data that we, talked about here in this particular presentation. This is, I don't know. I have to shake my head. This is not, it's just not smart. No, the people who want to come in person are going to come in person. And all you're doing is gaining, as you're implying, more audience by having that remote capability. Having the remote capability also gives you the opportunity to capture the presentations, the content, in a way that you can then make it on demand afterwards, which brings not only the in-person attendees, but the remote attendees more engagement opportunities if they want to go back and maybe see a session that they missed because they were at another one, or review one that they found particularly useful. So just saying, well, no, we're not going to, have the remote attendees, I think is just, doesn't take advantage at all of the big differences that we're now seeing in how events are becoming digital. It's going to slow your digital transformation, and it's really going to be, difficult to move forward with engaging your audience for across all their needs. Sometimes it's informational, sometimes it's hands-on, whatever. You've got to give them all the options.
So Brenda, let me share some thoughts, because we hear this a lot. I'll say a couple of quick things. I can't give you the specific numbers, but let me tell you a couple of our experiences from our internal programs that we have made hybrid. First, what we find is when we extend the audience to virtual, first thing is it doesn't have to be a budget buster. You can be very strategic about the types of sessions and content that you choose to deliver out to a broader virtual audience. So it doesn't have to be every session. It doesn't all have to be interactive and simultaneous. You can choose the content very deliberately that you want to get out to a large virtual audience. So that's one, it doesn't have to break the budget. The second thing is it's been our consistent experience that the contacts and titles and organizations that will consume our event virtually are newer to us than our existing customer base. So it can be a wonderful pipeline to start to engage contacts, titles, accounts that you hadn't been able to reach before with your traditional in-person offering. So that's another element. We expect to then see that virtual engagement transfer to next year. They're going to be in person with us. They're going to be on site with us because they were engaged with the content. They got familiar with your brand. Next year, they're going to be there on site with you. The last thing I would say, and then we can go to the next question, is we watched these three audiences very closely with Cvent Connect, which is our Super Bowl. It's our big user conference. And we were able to at least double the amount of attendees. Some of them were virtual. But what we found was at the end of the day, when we track that attendees down to pipeline and ultimately to revenue, the virtual cohort delivered revenue on about the same percentage as the in-person cohort. So hopefully I've given you a few things that you can potentially use to talk to your C-suite about the overall value of being able to have a virtual extension as part of that event. Okay. Let's see. Next one. Okay, fantastic. Ready, Laura?
Yes.
Next question. Unnamed, so we don't have a name, so we can't give a shout out on the name. Our members are used to live webinars for their continuing education needs, but surveys say they want in-person. But when we set up in-person, can't meet the guarantee for the venue. How might we solve that problem?
Okay, so that's telling me that when they set up the in-person, the number of people that they're expecting don't show up, right?
Yeah.
They get a lot of last
So they
minute.
weren't able to keep the contract minimum at the venue.
Yeah, so they got a lot of sounds like a lot of last minute options that they say, oh, I'm going to do it virtually because I can't get there in person. I don't think this is different in the digital world as much as it is, prior to the pandemic. This is the unpredictability of human nature, and giving them another option to not to come in person does open you up to this particular risk. I don't know, Mike, you may have some other ideas on this, but the only thing that I can think of is look, you've got to plan for the fact that having live webinars, having that kind of interaction digitally, like we've gotten used to with Zoom and those kinds of things, is going to be the way that people are now more and more comfortable, and they are going to want to get their training that way. So if your expectation was that here's the venue we're going to use for the in-person training, you may need to dial that down and like almost like the airlines do, oversell the seats, expecting that you're going to get some attrition.
So this is an interesting one. I'm conflicted in this response, but let me share some thoughts. The first thing that I heard when I read this question in my head was, I wonder why the attendees believe that the engagement is lacking here. What is it about the value prop that they came for training? What is it about the virtual nature of this that's falling short in their eyes? And so that's my first question would be, let's deeply understand what experience they're hoping for in the training that the virtual format is not giving them. That'd be the first one, because candidly, trainings can be well conducted in a virtual environment with the right engagement level. But I have
using polling and chat and things like that. Absolutely,
it can be a more deeply engaging back and forth than just broadcasting information, right? Because what I'm sensing here is that there's a little bit more interactivity that's desired. I will share another thing, and this is one of the things we do with our training program. We have a pretty robust training program at Cvent. We complement virtual trainings, which we do a lot of, with hands-on trainings that we do as part of our, I'm going to go back to it again. This is not a shameless push for Cvent Connect. It's responsive to your question. We have a training day at Cvent Connect where the first day of the conference is really set aside for our user base to come in person with us and get trained on the technology. Beginner, intermediate, advanced level courses. And that can be a great way to augment a virtual training program by giving your audience the in-person, hands-on experience that they want, by wrapping it as a programming element as part of a larger conference. That's one of the things we've done.
And you're going to have the venue there anyway. You're going to have the event. So just tacking that on is a cost-effective way of handling that problem, rather than setting up a separate venue that, if you don't meet the minimum, is expensive.
Yeah. And so we're just riding on the backs of the minimums we're meeting as part of the user conference anyway. Right. But I will tell you, sometimes that training is free. Sometimes it can be paid. It depends on your business model and what you'd like to do. But it is constantly one of the highest rated parts of Cvent Connect programming. The customers love to get trained in person.
Same at ours. We do Forrester events all the time, and it's those pre-event kind of things that where we do certifications in certain areas, particularly B2B marketing, that get a lot of attendance.
Great. Okay. So I'm seeing in my little console here that we got a lot more coming in. Thank you. Love it. Love the engagement. Thank you all for your questions. Okay.
Laura, and Mike, if we run out of time, we're going to come back and answer offline the questions that we didn't get to.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. Next question that came in, again, nameless. Would love to acknowledge you, but understand if you want to be anonymous. Okay, Laura, what are some of the key data points or KPIs for events that you suggest tracking to prove ROI?
You're not going to like my answer. My answer is, were you paying attention to the webinar? One of the key things that the data shows, and we believe is absolutely essential, is you cannot answer this question without knowing what the objectives are. So there's not one set of metrics that matter for every single event. Now, there are metrics that you're going to be able to gather more easily than others, like attendance and which sessions they went to, and if the digital component is high, how long they spent, and you're gonna be able to do surveys with them and gather information that way. But unless you start with what is our business objective and who is the audience, that is what's going to determine the key, the outcomes that you're looking for. And then you go back from there and say, well, what are the key performance indicators that are going to tell us whether or not we got those objectives? For example, in-person events are about customer engagement, but they can also be about demand gen. Two very different objectives, but those were the ones that the data showed us were the most important right now. So you need to decide what portion, if you're going to, do a big event, is going to be dedicated towards prospects and demand gen and showing them the love so that they want to be part of our vibrant community. And what part is going to be focused on making deeper relationships with our existing customers. I don't know, Mike, did you want to, did
Yeah,
you're
no,
welcome to like tell me I'm wrong, but
no,
that's my reaction.
no, you're exactly right. Maybe I just add a couple observations. So for example, um, for the virtual audiences that we meet, we are as interested in whether they're net new to the database. Is it a new contact? Is it a new title? Is it a new account? Because the objective for that audience was reach. We wanted to bring them into the category. We wanted to get them to know Cvent. So we assign a set of performance metrics to that virtual audience. Of course, we'd love them to convert to pipeline and revenue, but they're there because we wanted to engage them. So that's one element. I'll share just a couple thoughts because Laura, I think you nailed kind of the core ROI thing. The only other area that I would point to, and again, forgive me, folks, because this is my marketer person coming out. One of the more interesting pieces I get out of our event program is our message resonating with our audience? So sure, we look at pipeline and we look at revenue and we look at reach and we look at attendee satisfaction. Of course we do, to determine ROI. But some of the more interesting insights that our marketing team gets out of our events is, did our message resonate, and with who? Is our content resonating with prospects, with customers, with financial service organizations, with pharmaceutical organizations? That type of insight that comes out of our event program helps us refine and improve our messaging, helps us be more successful and reach these audiences on their terms. And so as we look at ROI, my last comment here would be, there's the classic financial piece. There is also the listening to these other elements of the data that are going to help you improve your event attendee experience year over year. They're going to help you improve your messaging year over year. There's a tremendous amount of value that lives in that data if you capture it and can parse through it.
And that's an excellent example, Mike. And in addition, like, it got me thinking too, it's the engagement data, right? And you say, well, okay, there's no financial component to engagement. But customer experience is not just about financial, or economic. In fact, we talk about the value that customers receive is actually having 4 dimensions. Sure, it can be financial. It can also be functional, like, the value they get is they can do something or that they haven't. But the other 2 components are experiential and symbolic. And this is where, when you're having an event, the value that is experiential is huge. And the value that is symbolic, I'm part of a bigger community, and look at what it means to be part of this community, comes across very clearly.
Great. Okay. My console is yelling at me. We've got a couple. Okay, so Laura, our job is the next 5 minutes. We got to answer 2 questions. These are top upvoted questions. So we are going to go through them really quick. Denise, thank you for your question. If tickets are sold for an event, if tickets are sold for an in-person event, do we charge for virtual as well? That's where my C-suite team thinks people will not pay to watch something virtually. Any thoughts on this question?
During the pandemic, Forrester held virtual only events. We charged for them. We made just as much money as we did without. And it's not because the audience was huge too. This is only for our existing customers kind of things and some select prospects, but we charge. And so I go back to the idea of like, hey, what's the objective? If the objective of the event is to deliver that level of value that people are willing to pay for it, those that are attending virtually should pay for that content, but they should also have the ability to continue to experience that content and use it after the event itself. And all of that adds value to what it is that they're experiencing. So Absolutely. I think, again, if your objectives though is different, like, well, we really want to expand the number of people, like Mike was saying earlier, how do we get, if they come virtually, are they going to come in person? That's a different objective. And so in that case, you really need to think about what is it we're trying to do. Mike, did you want to add?
Yep. Just quickly, Denise, I think you can. Again, apologies to go back to Cvent Connect. We have a paid in person, we have a free virtual tier, and we have a paid virtual tier.
Right.
And so we're giving the audience the choice, and we tier those experiences based on the content that's available, right? So the paid virtual tier does have some content and some programming that is not available to the free tier. So I'd encourage you to experiment with that. But that is a model that can work. But I do absolutely agree with Laura that just because the audience is virtual doesn't mean it has to be free. All right, 2 minutes left. Lisa, thank you for your question. This will be the last one we have time for in person, but we'll answer them all online. Interested in best practices for large-scale internal meetings that combine in-person and virtual. Not a webinar event, something highly produced and interactive for team members, regardless of how they are attending.
Okay, since we're limited on time, I'm going to offer one thought, and then Mike can fill in. This is where virtual can really have value in terms of the technology giving you more interactive capability. And so what I would say in terms of the best practices, not only do you use, the Q&A and the polls and all of those kinds of things to keep them involved, but you need to be able to handle the idea of the virtual breakout session. So if people are doing something, that if people are in person, they do a breakout. And if they're virtual, they go to a separate team meeting and do virtual there, and then bring everybody back together to talk about their, results.
Great. So just a couple thoughts. We just had our large sales kickoff company-wide here
That's what I was thinking.
We had that a couple months ago. No, it was only a month ago. It just feels like a couple months. We had about 2,000 in the room and about another 1,500 virtually. This is going to sound like a commercial. It's not meant to be. Choose your tech really carefully. Have something that can deliver a high quality keynote that has engagement features so your virtual attendees can engage simultaneously with the content that's going on in person. Treat it like a multi-session single day event. Have agendas, be able to pick your sessions that you want to go into. Don't underpower the implementation effort would be my last thought there. This is, if it's an internal, I imagine it's your employee base. They're probably hybrid. They're probably looking to connect and get motivated and connect to your culture. It's critical to the success of your organization that year to get that off to the right start. Don't underpower the implementation.
And the high production value is essential because, they may have the best intentions of being involved, and that, multitasking demon comes and pulls them away. So the more that they feel involved, the more they're going to stick with it.
Yeah. There is a huge ROI there. Okay. Laura, if you can, I'm just looking at my console. It sounds like the questions are still coming. Laura, maybe we take one more. Would you be available to take one more?
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. In today's time, when you want to pursue in-person events, what keeps attendees from signing up? Right? Or in other words, what are the crucial points to generate leads for event registrations in times of when virtual events are being so popular? I butchered that question.
I think, if we kind of take this apart a little bit, how do you, what are the crucial points to generate leads for event registrations on the in-person side when virtual are so popular? I go back to the word experience, Mike. You can deliver a very different experience in person. You just can, based on versus virtual. And while we were going through the pandemic and I was doing a lot of research on this, I still always felt that when we got to the vaccine or herd immunity, or the virus mutated in a certain way where we could safely get back together, that people would really still come back and want to do the in-person part. And interestingly, I think that that transition has taken longer. That we learned a lot about how to use digital and how to use it effectively. That now makes it, okay for people to attend virtually. But they're going to want to, at some point, they're going to have a great experience virtually, if that's what it is, that is going to cause them to want to therefore be in person. So, I would look at how do you create an experience that is going to give them experiential value, as we talked about, not just the financial value of attending the in-person part, but knowing that they're going to have the ability to interact digitally, either during the event, afterwards, maybe even before, as all part of the experience.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is a couple of 3 things. But Laura, it's all exactly in line with your experiential comment. We are seeing for the first time that the primary motivator to attend an in-person event is not content; it's networking. Yeah. So in your marketing, I would stress the networking capabilities of the in-person experience. I would also say venue and destination matters. Bleisure travel is real. So shamelessly use it to drive your in-person registrations. The last thing, don't sleep on your evening events, evening entertainments, these kinds of things. Look, people have been cooped up. They want to go out too. So networking, the evening programming, these things are all critical.
The destination
parts of the experience that Laura is talking about. And you just don't get that virtually. You're never going to get that virtually. So, all right, Laura, I think that we've come to the top of the hour and well past it. I maybe don't want to overstay our welcome. But let me do this just before we close. First of all, before I thank the audience, Laura, thank you again. Thank you and your team for helping us gather these insights and for so eloquently discussing them today. So Laura, thank you again. And to our audience, thank you all for joining. It's always a pleasure. Hope you filled out the survey. We want to keep these things engaging and impactful and useful for you. We can only get better if you tell us what you didn't like. So please fill out that survey. Other than that, we'll let you all get on with your day. Thanks again for spending the time with us today.